is the third planet from the Sun. It's the only planet known to have an atmosphere containing free oxygen, oceans of water on its surface, and of course, life. And here we exist. We divided this Earth into 7 continents and 195 countries. We share this planet, our living world, with almost 8 billion people and million kinds of other species. Do we all have equal rights to this planet? Do we belong to this home equally? Perhaps not. Our civilization witnessed 2 world wars. We are now planning and working to save the world from global warming, but at the same time, we are making threats of nuclear war to protect our individual interests. Discrimination and misconduct are being practiced in different parts of the world in the name of nationality, religion, race, caste and creed, and sometimes in the name of ethnicity. Here is one of the most horrific and alarming human rights violations perpetrated on one of the most persecuted minorities, the Rohingyas, by Myanmar in the name of ethnic cleansing. According to Human Rights Watch, since late August 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have fled Myanmar's Rakhine state to escape the military's large-scale campaign of ethnic cleansing. The atrocities committed by Myanmar security forces, including mass killings, sexual violence, and widespread arson, amount to crimes against humanity. Military and civilian officials have repeatedly denied that security forces committed abuses during the operations, claims which are contradicted by extensive evidences and witness accounts. The Rohingya have faced decades of discrimination and repression under successive Myanmar governments, effectively denied citizenship under the 1982 Citizenship Law. They are one of the largest stateless populations in the world. Restrictions on movement and lack of access to basic health care have led to dire humanitarian conditions for those displaced by earlier waves of violence in 2012 and 2016. Rohingyas are an indigenous people of Myanmar who are the principal inhabitants of the northern part of Rakhine state bordering Bangladesh. Unlike any other displaced population across the globe, Rohingyas are possibly the only ethnic group of the world who don't have a territory of their own. Even the United Nations certification of Rohingyas as one of the world's most persecuted minorities doesn't really describe the fullest extent of their bizarre life under the constant threat of the Myanmar military mechanism. Near historic and unwavering persecution at the hands of the military has also been the defining character of their routine life. The recent exodus of nearly half of the entire population into Bangladesh was only the natural chronology of a state-sponsored systematic eviction from the very land the Rohingyas called home.
মায়ানমার সেনাবাহিনী এবং মায়ানমার সরকার দাফে দাফে প্রায় ৬০-৭০ বছর যাবৎ আমাদের রোহিঙ্গা কমিউনিটির উপর গোপনে বিভিন্ন সময় বিভিন্ন আইন পাস করে আমাদের বিরুদ্ধে আমাদেরকে তো নির্যাতন করতেছে। তারপর এই যে ভিতরে ভিতরে যেন পৃথিবীতে জিনিসটা ফ্লাশ না হয় এরকম গোপনে গোপনে ওরা আমাদেরকে বিভিন্ন প্রকারে ওরা আমাদেরকে আরকান থেকে নির্মূল করে দেওয়ার জন্য ওরা বিভিন্ন সময় বিভিন্ন প্রোগ্রাম করে আসছে।
Like other community, Buddhist community, we are Rohingya Muslim community. Our father, mother, our generation, the forefather is ancestor, the citizen of Myanmar. 1952, 1956, 1960. All that time my father, mother alive. Then my father voted that time.
আমার বাড়ি মন্দির দৈনিক জমেটে আর বেশি কইনাবাদে সরকার আছে আর বন্ধু মারি মারি অনেক ঘর পুরা দিতে আর আছে আর বেশি জ্বালাই বেশি দুঃখ পাই আর
পেড়ে ঘর বাড়ি ঘর বাড্ডা বাড্ডা ওসন ওসন ঘর সল গুরু আসিল ঘর আসিল করু আসিল জায়গা দেবেন আসিল তো হেন্দালা বেশি করে কষ্ট পাই আর হিয়ার আগেও লড়াইয়ের আগেও সারে জুমা করতে ন দে জুমা আমাদের মানুষ গলি লাগে একজন দুজন সময় দেওয়া করে।
Myanmar, or Burma, as it was known about 3 decades ago, is a country geographically located at the juncture of South and Southeast Asia. It borders 5 countries at its south, east and north that include Thailand, Laos, China, India and Bangladesh, and a vast openness of Bay of Bengal marks its western limits. The administrative structure of Myanmar is composed of 7 states, 7 divisions and 6 self-administered territory, with Naypyidaw as its capital, a multilingual and multi-ethnic country. The demographic composition of Myanmar includes 135 legitimate ethnic groups where, with about 66% of the total population, the Burmas are accounted to be the principal and dominant race of the country. The Burma population is predominantly centered in the 7 divisions, whereas the states and self-administered territories are principally inhabited by the ethnic population. Besides the 135 ethnic groups who are constitutionally legitimized by the Myanmar government, there are few more communities who have been living within the geographic boundary of Myanmar for centuries, but don't enjoy their constitutional rights. Amongst them, one of the largest communities are the Rohingyas.
Rohingyas are there for centuries together. Even during the Mughal period, during the British period subsequently, they were there. The Arab traders were the first people to settle in Rakhine state. Subsequently, people from other parts of the world came, including Portuguese and Spaniards. They also settled down in that part of the world. So it's a mixture of multi-population, multi-ethnic society.
After British have left and Myanmar got their independence, they have tried to enforce their own nationality, like a Burman nationality, over all ethnic people. So that has been rejected, and for which there are a lot of insurgency we have seen.
From 100 years they are living in their own land. Now suddenly there is a law, the nationality law of 1982, which actually is saying that Rohingya are not the citizens of Myanmar. But before 1982, they enjoyed all the facilities of Myanmar as a citizen.
মায়ানমারে সরকারিভাবে ওরা ঘোষণা করছে 135টা জাতিগোষ্ঠী আছে, ওর মধ্যে আমাদের রোহিঙ্গাকে বাদ দিয়ে দিয়েছে ওরা। তারপর অন্য ছোট কমিউনিটিও আছে, মোয়েং আছে, কিচিং আছে, এরকম ছোট ছোট কিছু আরও 6টা কমিউনিটিকে ওরা বাদ দিয়ে দিয়েছে। আরকান প্রদেশে বড় মেজরিটি হচ্ছে 2টা, রেখাইন কমিউনিটি আর রোহিঙ্গা কমিউনিটি। রেখাইন হচ্ছে ফার্স্ট, আমরা রোহিঙ্গা হচ্ছে সেকেন্ড। তারপর চাকমা আছে, বড়ুয়া আছে, হিন্দু আছে, মুরুং আছে, আর কেতে আছে, এটা হচ্ছে ছোটো ছোটো ওরা জনগোষ্ঠী, বড় গোষ্ঠী হচ্ছে আমরা দুইটা। তো যারা দখলদার যারা বাহিনী আছে ওটা হচ্ছে মায়ানমারের বর্মন গোষ্ঠী যারা আছে, যারা শাসক গোষ্ঠী, বর্তমানে অং সান সুকি বলেন, আপনি মিয়াও লাইং বলেন, সেনাপ্রধান, এমনকি ওদের পরিকল্পনা এমন যে একটা ক্যাম্পের, যে আমাদের পাশে একটা তুমরু রাইট ক্যাম্প ছিল, ওদের ক্যাম্পের যে অস্ত্রের কারখানার গুদামের অস্ত্রের গুদামের যে দায়িত্ব থাকে ওটাও বর্মনদের হাতে, মানে ওরা এরকম করে কন্ট্রোল করে রাখে, সবাইকে নির্যাতন করতেছে।
They were elected in the parliament in first 3 consecutive parliaments in Myanmar. They had 16 members from 1948 to 1962. They had 1 cabinet member also. But after 1962, change in power structure in Myanmar changed these things, their status, and they have become gradually subjected to discrimination. They were deprived of their basic rights, basic civic rights. They had no freedom of movement. So these things actually forced to a situation which is now built on lack of trust between the communities.
আরকান প্রদেশে আমাদের 17টা টাউনশিপ আছে, 17টা টাউনশিপে উপজেলা লেভেলে, ওর মধ্যে অলরেডি 15টা উপজেলার মধ্যে মংডু বুচিদং সারা বাদবাকি যে উপজেলাগুলো আছে 2012 সালে মায়ানমার সেনাবাহিনী, তারপর হচ্ছে নাংসিস নাইং একটা বুদ্ধিস্টের একটা ধর্মীয় একটা উগ্রপন্থী গ্রুপ আছে, ওরা সবাই মিলে আমাদের বাড়িঘর সব কিছু জ্বালাই পোড়াই দিয়ে, মানে যাকে যেখানে পাইছে ওখানে হত্যা দর্শন সব কিছু করে 2012 থেকে আজকে 2019 পর্যন্ত অলরেডি সিট্রে, কোনাইজং, পোকটু, মরাউ, চকট এরকম 7টা আইডিপি ক্যাম্প করে অলরেডি ওদেরকে কেঁড়াতারের বেড়া দিয়ে এনজিওদের তাড়ানোর উপর নির্ভর, চতুর্দিকে মায়ানমার সরকারের নিরাপত্তা কর্মীরা পাহারা দিয়ে ওইখানে অবস্থানে রাখছে। অলরেডি কুফি আন্নান কমিশনের সুপারিশটাও ওদেরকে নিজের জন্মভূমিতে ফেরত দিয়ে অধিকার দিয়ে পুনর্বাসনের কথা বলছে, কিন্তু আজ পর্যন্ত 1% অগ্রগতি হয়নি।
With about 36.778 square kilometers of area, the Rakhine State enjoys the status of a state within the Union of Myanmar, Sitwe, or formerly Akyab, being its capital. Prior to October 2016, the approximate population census of this state appeared to be of a total population of 3.3 million, of which the Rakhine community was of about 2.1 million, Rohingya Community 1 million, and Mog, Chak, Marma, and Murong making up the rest.
মায়ানমার দেশটা ব্রিটিশ থেকে 1948 জানুয়ারির 7 তারিখ আমরা স্বাধীনতা লাভ করছি। ব্রিটিশ থেকে স্বাধীনতা লাভ করার সময় বর্তমান যিনি স্টেট কাউন্সিলর অং সান সুকি আছে, ওনার পিতা অনসাংয়ের নেতৃত্বে, তখন অনসাংয়ের যে অ্যাডভাইজার দুজন ছিল আব্দুর রাজ্জাক, রশিদ, ওরা দুজন রোহিঙ্গা, স্বাধীনতার নেতৃত্বের অ্যাডভাইজার ওরা দুজন রোহিঙ্গা ছিল। ওই সময় থেকে 1948 থেকে শুরু করে 2010 পর্যন্ত সামরিক সরকার হোক অথবা গণতন্ত্র সরকার হোক, যতটুকু ইলেকশন হয়েছে সব ইলেকশনে আমরা ভোট দিছি, ভোট আমরা নিছিও তো আমাদের থেকে সংসদ সদস্য, মন্ত্রী, মিনিস্টার সব কিছু হয়েছে, কিন্তু 2015 সালে আমাদেরকে বলছে যে তোমরা অবৈধ অনুপ্রবেশকারী বাঙালি।
Of the 275.8 kilometers of border that Bangladesh shares with Myanmar, 219.5 kilometers belongs to the Rakhine State, and majority of the Rohingya villages are dotted around this border. Presence of the rugged Arakan hill range that geographically isolates the Rakhine State from the rest of Myanmar further augmented social, political, and economic ties between the communities residing on either side of the Bangladesh-Myanmar border.
Every country is giving the real citizenship who are living for lifelong in this old land, motherland. But the government, the Myanmar government is different from other countries.
Historically, people from different countries, they move to different regions. And in Europe now we know that there are many Germans living in Austria. There are many Germans living in Bulgaria or different parts of the world. But they remain citizens of those countries.
They point out, yes, they were living there, but they came way back. Now, if they had come before 71, if they had come before 1948, then why can't they be citizens of Myanmar, even if we take that, okay, they are Bengalis, for hypothetically, even if we say, okay, why can't a Bengali be a citizen of Myanmar if a Rakhine can be a Bangladeshi citizen? We have Rakhine community.
আমরা যে অধিকার নিয়ে এখানে বসবাস করি অন্যান্য দেশে আছে কিনা আমার জানা নাই। ওইখানে অন্য ধর্মাবলম্বী কথা দূরে থাকুক, আমরা বুদ্ধিস্ট যারা আছি ওখানে তাদেরও অবস্থা ভালো নাই। বার্মিজ বুদ্ধিস্ট এবং রাখাইন বুদ্ধিস্ট মধ্যেও ডিফারেন্স আছে।
When I was appointed as the chief missionary in Bangladesh, I read a lot of literature on the history of the Rohingyas. While we can debate a lot about how many moved when, which generation mixed, there are certain things which are non-debatable, and that's about the historical heritage of those people that goes back hundreds of years. Now, there were a lot of movements, there was a lot of mixtures, there was a lot of great powers, empires that have moved borders and they have moved people around. But what we cannot deny is that the Rohingya people have been living on the territory for a very long time.
শত বছর আমাদের ইতিহাস আছে, আমরা মায়ানমারে থাকি, না হলে আমাদের আকিয়াপের বড় মসজিদ আছে, হাওয়ালাঙ্গের গাইবি মসজিদ আছে। মুসলমান না থাকলে, অস্তিত্ব না থাকলে ওখানে মসজিদ কারা বানাবে? বুদ্ধরা তো মসজিদ বানাবে না, মায়ানমার সরকার তো মসজিদ বানাবে না, ওরা তো মসজিদ ভাঙতেছে, আমাদের ইতিহাসটা ধ্বংস করতেছে।
আর একটা মানে কি স্কুলের মধ্যে পন্না বইতে নদে আর মরিলে খবরস্থানে গাড়াতেও নদে জনজা বইতে নদে এন্দিল্লা জুলুম আর গইতে 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 লাস্টিক আর বাংলাদেশের মধ্যে রিফিউজি বানাবে লাগে।
তো আর বর্মার মাঝে বেশি শান্তি না পাই, ওনারা বাংলাদেশের মধ্যে যদি শান্তি পাই দিলে আর বহুত সুন্দর করে চলে ফেলতাম। আর শান্তি আন বর্মার মাঝে নাই।
ওদের পলিসিটা হচ্ছে এই ধরনের ডিভাইড অ্যান্ড রুল। এখানে মুসলিম আছে, রাখাইন আছে, অন্যরা আছে, সবাইকে কিন্তু ওরা এইভাবে একটা মানে সংকট সৃষ্টি করে রাখে, বিভেদ সৃষ্টি করে রাখে। আসলে ধর্ম কোনো ব্যাপার না, রাজনীতির জন্য ধর্মকে ব্যবহার করা হয়।
This is a kind of apartheid kind of policy that Myanmar pursued, particularly since 1978, and that was not actually dealt strongly by the global community. Here Myanmar actually got away with this kind of policy without much resistance from the global community, and it continued, and it gave Myanmar a chance to actually play with the politics of identity.
71-এ যখন আপনারা পাইছেন, বঙ্গবন্ধুকে পাইছেন, এরকম যদি আমাদের একটা যদি আজকে লিডার থাকতো, আমাদের এই দুর্ভাগ্য আসতো না।
Myanmar's first constitution crafted by their father of the nation and also commander-in-chief of armed forces, General Aung San, allowed the provision of greater autonomy of their ethnic minority-dominated states to decide their future status after 10 years. That time frame was supposed to expire in 1956. But in 1957, the military house-confined the elected government, arbitrarily scrapped the constitution, and protest by those minorities were met by violent retribution and effectively caused internal conflict and human rights violation. The scheme infuriated all the ethnic minorities, notably Christian Karen, Shan, Kachin and Chin people, and also the Buddhist Rakhines. Almost every ethnic group formed their own ethnic armies to safeguard their own ethnic identity. Their internal conflict has resulted in a large number of civilian deaths and created millions of refugees around the globe, resulted in an exodus of over 1 million people to the neighboring countries. About 643,000 people, majority of whom are ethnic Karens and Shans refugees, resided in long-term camps in Thailand since 2016. Another 100,000 ethnic Kachins and Kokangs have crossed into Yunnan province, China, with about 700,000 remaining internally displaced. These figures exclude the ongoing Rohingya crisis, which has placed Myanmar at the center of one of the largest refugee crises in the world. The resurgence of Buddhist extremism throughout Myanmar in recent years has also contributed in an upsurge of interfaith rivalry in Greater Rakhine State that collectively resulted in massive humanitarian crisis and mass migration. Any changes in demographic order on one side of the border has a profound effect on the other. Bangladesh, with the geopolitical proximity to the Rohingya inhabitant territories, has become the unwitting victim of this Rohingya crisis.
Barmar military das arare fara sarida tu gergol dori ere das moge tase gya foolish biagune dori ere launching biagune berai dora ere into kesu furader kesu harer kesu marer kesu guli marer kesu maya hwendere rape gorer
biagunur guli mari 100 আর মুখসি কাম্মাদে মারি ফেলাই বেগুনরে আল্লাহর তো মগরে তারা বেগুন মারি ফেলা বাদে হেডে উতরে তাওয়া লবর সঙ্গে আয় আসছিলাম হেডে তার বাসে মাজিদে আর গো মাজি গুলি
আর গুলি মাজিদে মিলিটারি আর বইতে গিয়ে আর মিলিটারি বেড়াতে পারে আর সাবতে পারে গুলি মিলিটারি
2017 সালের 25 আগস্টে হঠাৎ রাতের 1টা বাজে মায়ানমার সেনাবাহিনী বিজিবি সবাই মিলে আমাদের যাকে পাইছে তাকে হত্যা, তারপর নির্বিচারে গুলি, বাড়িঘর আগুন। তখন এমন পরিবেশ যে যেদিকে পাচ্ছে ওদিকে পালাচ্ছে। বাংলাদেশ সীমান্ত পর্যন্ত আসতে প্রায় 60 কিলোমিটার 80 কিলোমিটার বড় বড় পাহাড়, কাদা পাহাড় অতিক্রম করে আসতে হয়। ওই সময় আমার 8টা বাচ্চা আছে, আমি 2টা কান্দে করে নিয়েছি, আর বাদ বাকি আমার গ্রামে রাখি আছি। ওদের কি অবস্থা আমি জানি না।
They have killed the people, they have burned the villages, they have raped the women. So this cannot be a part of military operation. Because I, being an ex-military general, I understand that if there is any security problem, the military operation, they do have certain rules of engagement. So they have not followed any rules of engagement so far.
They were looking for opportunities and they went for several military campaign or military crackdown against them in Rakhine or in Arakan, former Arakan. So we can see that it's basically the very nature of the Myanmar state, which is highly undemocratic and which has not developed civil society, which has not developed democratic space. So this has actually created this identity crisis.
During the last 2 years, preceding 2 years, many journalists from all over the world, many right activists from all over the world have been watching the situation. They have taken photographs, they have interviewed the victims, and they have also investigated into the matter individually, discreetly, and quite successfully. So they have enormous volume of evidence to prosecute the authorities in Burma.
According to my research, more than 19 countries where we have Rohingyas. We have Rohingyas in the US, in Japan, in Australia, in India, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, in Thailand, and I can go on and on and on. So it's not only the headache of Bangladesh. Yes, we have a big headache because as we have a largest number of them, but they're spread throughout the world. And the reason they got spread because this, what Azim Ibrahim, one of the good scholar on the Rohingyas, mentioned a slow genocide.
In your 2016 edition of the book, you warn that we're on the brink of genocide. In the new version, which you'll have a signing for this evening, you actually say you think a full-scale genocide is underway. Talk us through your thinking on that.
Yeah. So the original book, it was called The Rohingyas Inside Myanmar's Hidden Genocide. And the argument I made there that this is a slow-motion genocide that is happening. Now, genocide has a very technical legal definition, which Beth can allude to much more as an international lawyer. In the new book, or the new edition of the book is just Inside Myanmar's Genocide. The word hidden has now been removed because it is no longer hidden.
My point here is you kill the identity, then you are actually also being complicit to genocide, because that is what it means, intention to destroy. Are we ready for that? Are we ready to kill the Rohingya identity once and for all?
The crime is a continuous process. This sort of crime, genocide, crime of genocide, crime of several offenses against humanity, they are a continuous process. So when a Rohingya crosses into Bangladesh, he carries with him the crime, in the sense that he is a victim of the crime And that crime continues when he crosses border into Bangladesh.
To what atrocities had been happening there, and why these people are in Bangladesh, why they have to leave their own country.
Presently, there are over 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh, including the latest batch of 700,000 that came after October 9, 2016, and the 250,000 that arrived since Bangladesh emerged as an independent country.
Ana Rohingya kole lora de Burma goi hiya gwara lora ye 1970 hata made gwa aramadan nagama sai sere go yore ana arab bada lora ye 1991 made e gya ayore o nasaka ibade hiya gwalora ye 2004 to gwalora ye 2016 to gwalora ye 2017 made last ana de.
The Bangladeshis know better than most that this is a group of people who have come and crossed the border and come back again a number of times because conditions and the root causes of the problem have not really been addressed in Myanmar.
After fleeing from the Rakhine state of Myanmar, with its 37,300 square kilometers of beautiful land by the Bay of Bengal, these million-plus people are now living in cramped refugee camps in Bangladesh, roughly half a square meter for each person.
The world's fastest growing humanitarian crisis as thousands of Rohingya refugees are spending a fourth night stranded near the border with Bangladesh.
How extremist Buddhists are thought to have taken part in the military crackdown in Burma's Rakhine state.
Their first footsteps on safe soil.
The Rohingyas are one of the most persecuted minorities in the world.
So these people are totally dependent on local charities. Either that or they'll just go hungry.
A report by the Associated Press or AP has confirmed the presence of more than 5 mass graves in Myanmar.
The UN calls them one of the world's most persecuted minorities. More than 1 million people caught up in a cycle of violence and poverty.
We don't know how many people have been killed, but we do have some idea of how many have been burnt and chased out of their homes.
The discrimination against and the persecution of the Rohingya minority has continued unabated in full view of the world.
This issue must be resolved through humanitarian aid and politics. Such an atrocity in this age is unbelievable, and it's all happening before the eyes of the entire world.
Hello everyone, I'm Priyanka Chopra and I'm live today from Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh. This is one of the biggest refugee camps in the world at the moment, and I'd like to take a second to show you the expanse of it.
It is very important we are here because what the Rohingya people are going through are despicable and is very, very tragic. It should not be allowed. Every single one of them deserves to have the human rights.
I'm therefore thankful that here in Bangladesh, Rohingya refugees have their existence recognized and are being provided by the government and UNHCR with documentation and proof of their identity.
I went to Bangladesh last March as a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador to see what I could possibly contribute in responding to the massive humanitarian needs unfolding there.
This is a major humanitarian crisis, which looks like ethnic cleansing. And it is something for which the Burmese authorities, and especially the military, must take full responsibility.
The United States continues to put pressure on Myanmar to ensure that those conditions actually exist. We recently sanctioned senior members of the Myanmar military and their immediate families on top of sanctions in the past to really forcefully present that message and we'll continue to do so. We'd love to see other members of the international community join us.
Those people, you see, who sort of harassing some Muslim, then they should remember Buddha. I think such circumstances, Buddha helping, definitely help to those poor Muslim. So still I feel that. So very sad, very sad.
Will not close our hearts.
Non guardiamo da un'altra parte.
Will not look at the other side.
La presenza di Dio oggi anche si chiama Rohingya.
The presence of God today also calls in this way.
The campaign of violence against the Rohingya continues, with the security forces slowly bleeding the remaining Rohingya population and continuing to force them to flee to Bangladesh.
Because Myanmar has refused access to human rights investigators, the current situation cannot yet be fully assessed, but the situation remains or seems a textbook example of ethnic cleansing.
First of all, listening to the terrible stories of massive violence, of killings, of rape, of torture, of houses or villages burned. It is probably one of the most tragic stories in relation to the violation, the systematic violation of human rights.
It's remarkable that the government of Bangladesh welcomed such a large number of refugees at a point in time where all around the world we're seeing the opposite.
Let's not forget that the whole world is watching. What happens here is not just relevant to Bangladesh and Myanmar. What happens here has global implications. This is not just about Rohingyas, this is about all refugees.
The different states have to some extent provided this support for humanitarian agencies, but not necessarily that they as a state took the responsibility to resolve it more at a political level.
As a global crisis, Bangladesh tries to show it to the world that every country, every organization has a role to play to solve the crisis, including Myanmar.
It is a highly complex humanitarian emergency. It is a very difficult crisis with very vulnerable people.
Bangladesh being immediate neighboring country, very near to the, particularly in the North Rakhine state of Myanmar. Therefore, the people of Bangladesh and the government of Bangladesh could not stop their coming into Bangladesh.
It almost reminded Bangladesh of 1971. Just imagine in 71, if India would have stopped us at the border, what would have happened? So from that experience, I believe, long before the government actually went up there, people really opened their arms, opened their houses. They allowed them to settle down. That was remarkable.
We are hosting about 1 million population in a relatively small space of land. So we cannot really afford more. In addition to this 6,500 acres of land, a few hundred acres of forestry has been deforested in search of firewood by this Rohingya population.
The number of people also one has to remember is huge. We have a population now, 1.2 million, which is incidentally larger than the population of Bhutan. Now, Bhutan became Bhutan in 6,000 years, but this is one Bhutan which literally got established in 3 months' time. That's the magnitude we have to remember.
Our people have shared their shelters, their food, their clothing with these people. How do you value that? A lot of agencies, government agencies has remained engaged here to serve this community. The district administration, the Bangladesh police, the health services, family planning services, social services department, women and children affairs ministry, local government engineering department, department of public health engineering, and a lot many, even army. Army is also deployed, still remains deployed to safeguard them from any security threats, security problems.
উকিয়ার মানুষ যেটা দেখিয়েছে সেটা তো বিশ্বের অন্য কোথাও এই নজির স্থাপন করতে পারে নাই। আপনি পৃথিবীর ইতিহাস ঘাটলে এই ইনফ্লেক্স জনিত কারণে এত বৃহৎ সংখ্যক মানুষকে আশ্রয় দিয়ে এই আমরা নিজেরাই যে আরেকটা ইনফ্লেক্সের শিকার হয়েছি, সেটা কি কেউ ওইভাবে চোখ বন্ধ করে চিন্তা করেছে?
আমরা বলবো যে এই ক্রাইসিসটা ঘটাইছে মায়ানমার, এটার সমাধানও করতে হবে মায়ানমারকে। যে অং সান সুকি ওনাকে বিশ্ব নোবেল পুরস্কার দিয়েছে, ওনার উচিত ছিল বাংলাদেশের প্রাইম মিনিস্টারের সাথে সাক্ষাৎ করে যারা অপরাধী আছে সেনাবাহিনী ওদেরকে আমি শাস্তি দেব, এদের অধিকার রোহিঙ্গাদের অধিকার, রোহিঙ্গাদের নাগরিকত্ব আমি সম্পূর্ণ সমাধান করব। বাংলাদেশ মায়ানমার আমরা বন্ধু, লোকদেরকে আমার হাতে তুলিয়ে দেবো। এরকম অং সান সুকি বাংলাদেশে আসে, এরকম বাংলাদেশের নেত্রীর সাথে কথা বলে আসে সাক্ষাৎ করা উচিত ছিল, কিন্তু আমরা এই পর্যন্ত অপেক্ষায় আছি, কিন্তু আজ পর্যন্ত আসেনি।
Myanmar government, they should have handled this situation patiently. They should not have allowed the army or their law enforcement agency to attack the common people.
The idea of this art camp was to garner and increase the local and international support for the education of the Rohingya children. So they said that we'd like to be doctors, we'd provide them with medicine and injection, because that's all they know about doctors. The doctors provide medicines and injections. Some of them have said they want to be pilots, and they've put very rational element into justifying why they want to become pilots. There's one person who wants to be chairman of Burma. There are girl childs who want to become female Majis, who, as you know, are leaders in the camps. So very interesting elements, very emotional elements in their interests as well. The fact that they're able to articulate those interests in their words and then draw them gives a lot of hope, gives a lot of promise that lies as a responsibility to all of us and the international community to support them to become whatever these children want to become. If we're not able to support them, then it's our failure.
আমাদের প্রত্যাশা আমরা নিজ দেশে আমাদের পূর্ণ নাগরিকতা নিয়ে আমরা ফিরে যেতে চাই।
আমাদের দেশের নাগরিকতা, আমাদের দেশের মৌলিক অধিকার, আমাদের দেশের আইসিসি কোর্টত যে গণহত্যার বিচার আমি দাবি করি।
প্রধানমন্ত্রী যেটা 5 দফা বাস্তবায়ন আমাদের জন্য জাতিসংঘ তুলছে, ওইটা বাস্তবায়ন হলে আমরা মায়ানমার ফেরত যেতে চাই।
এটি সম্পূর্ণভাবে মিয়ানমার এবং তার নিজস্ব নাগরিক রোহিঙ্গাদের মধ্যকার একটি সমস্যা। তাদের নিজেদেরই এর সমাধান করতে হবে। রোহিঙ্গাদের নিরাপদ, সুরক্ষিত ও সম্মানের সঙ্গে স্বেচ্ছায় রাখাইনে নিজ গৃহে যাওয়ার মাধ্যমেই এই সমস্যার সমাধান সম্ভব।
Now what happens to these people? Will they be a stateless? Will they be a sub-nation which will be going into oblivion? Or they will be persecuted in various countries? They will join some kind of a international extremist group or international insurgency. That will be a responsibility of the whole of the world.
I think it's clearly true that there's a link between the lack of secure legal status for these people in Myanmar and the fact that they've continued to face successive waves of violence against them and to feel that they have to leave the country and seek protection in Bangladesh. That's why we think that a pathway to citizenship in Myanmar must be part of the solution.
Why can you not go into Bangladesh?
No, we have no intention. We are not Bengali, we are not Bangladeshi. We are still waiting to go back, to come back our homeland.
What would it take to persuade you to go home?
The perpetrators must be taken to the trial, international trial, and then to restore our rights, our citizenship, like other community in Myanmar.
Simple repatriation without the kinds of assurances and support for the Rohingya themselves is not necessarily the best solution. They fled because of fears of violence and because of actual violence. To return them without the proper support and the proper protections would be a challenge. And
it's about finding a political solution, finding an answer in Myanmar, from Burma, creating the conditions for a safe, dignified return.
On the issue of protection, there is a talk about, almost putting some 100,000 people to Bhasanchar. Now this has to be understood, very seriously, because a lot of people are talking about it. The international community, they're raising this issue. Now the point is, first is not 1.2 million people are not been shifted to Bhasanchar. It's only, it's less than 100,000, actually around 90,000 people. Now if the international community is so attentive to this particular issue, I think they should give solutions. Either they should say that we are ready to take them. There are land after land in Canada, in Australia, even in the US. So why aren't they talking about them helping these people? Why are you saying that you can't shift them to Bhasanchar because there will be tsunami? Well, if that is the case, then why don't you give a solution?
Resettlement is one of the traditional UNHCR solutions that UNHCR pursues. Through resettlement, people leave the country where they found protection and they start a new life in a third country. This is usually available only to a small number of refugees.
I would not be in favor of a third country settlement, because that would literally support the genocidal intent, because that is going to finish this particular community for good. Now that we don't want. We want a Rohingya community to exist. It has an old civilization. It has its own language. It has its own culture, its own food, its own music, its own poetry. It has as I say, it's a civilization.
I think the most important steps forward toward repatriation, the power lies in the hands of the government of Myanmar. There have to be changes to policy and practice that are implemented on the ground that will give people the confidence that they need to return home.
It's important when we talk about return and repatriation that we emphasize the need for sustainable return. The second thing, and as the UN, we very much appreciate that there's been unwavering commitment from the government of Bangladesh that return needs to be voluntary and in safety and in dignity.
Nobody becomes a refugee by choice. They're forced to become refugees. And the longer they stay away from their country, the weaker their connections become, the harder it is for them to reestablish themselves. So it is an important goal for people to go home as quickly as possible.
There are 4 key issues which is preventing sustainable repatriation. Number 1 is the recognition of their identity. They must be recognized as an ethnic population of Myanmar. That's number 1, and that is linked to actually citizenship. The number 2 is they must be allowed to go back to their respective villages. So they will not go to any camp in Myanmar from a camp here. Number 3 is they must have basic civic rights, right of movement, freedom of movement, livelihood opportunities, and access to education, health, etc. And number 4 is they must be allowed to get back the properties that belong to them before they were displaced. If these 4 key issues are recognized as the stumbling block to repatriation, I think things become more easy.
4 of the top officials have been banned by USA. Not only USA, there should be more who should be banned by the entire globe, including the Western country, UN. And of course, we would urge that China is our friend, India is our friend. They must try to resolve in their own interest.
History will remember what the world did or did not do for the Rohingya refugees. History will also remember what Bangladesh did or did not do, or the international agencies did or did not do. But if the global powers, especially the global superpowers, do not act upon it, it may take a long time. If they don't make an effort, this will be recorded in history as a failure of the world.
They have to go back to their motherland. They'll have to go back to their soil. Otherwise, any other solution will not stop the bleeding in their hearts.
I was listening a song, one singer singing in Rohingya refugee camp. He's a sort of a baul singer, and that the line of this lyrics is like that to be in my own country, I want to sing with my own ear. And you know that it's just so painful if you feel something that you are not in your own country and the whole surrounding is not yours.
Allah tu ibadi arar bisar goroya kiyo nai onke simor peturer nizar deshlai ay gilam boy shonarar kan aram felai onke simor peturer nizar deshlai.
The Republic of the Union of Myanmar shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, in relation to the members of the Rohingya group in its territory, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts